Well, hello anyone. It's me, crusty old crow, back again to do another one of these G.I. Joe classified series 6-inch by Hasbro reviews that I am now referring to as the tactical perspective. As I discussed in the first video, if anyone did end up watching that, it was on rock and roll. I mentioned that I am a retired Canadian Armed Forces veteran in the combat arms with 25 years experience, and I've done the job. I've gone to places and I've done the things. And one of the big things that drew me to the G.I. Joe classified line, besides being a kid obsessed with it in the 80s, was the level of detail and realism that they're achieving at Hasbro right now with these figures. And it's a lot of the smaller details, these smaller details that I don't think sometimes are really obvious to people who maybe never have been in the military and don't realize why these things are included, or why certain things were excluded, or maybe why they should be included. But Hasbro's done a bang-up job with a lot of these figures. And enough so that it takes a guy like me, now retired, to be so impressed that I swallow the fact I don't know much about tech. That's why these are one takes. And I make a YouTube video, not just one, but a couple now on these things. So today we're going to be covering the second in our series, but the first, and what I like to refer to as my Holy Trinity. It's not the Holy Trinity of any Joe collection that others would think of, you know, with the Snake Eyes and the Cobra Commander or Scarlet and Flint, Destro, have you. No, mine is the characters that I connected with most as a kid and still connect with as an adult, especially with a military career like the one I've had behind me. So, you know, that Trinity includes guys like Breaker, the undersold Breaker, Rakondo, and the guy standing in front of you right now, Stalker, probably the most important and top of that list, and for, you know, a few reasons. And as you can see just off to the side, we've got the guy I reviewed first, rock and roll, sitting all judgy, watching Stalker, hoping to make him nervous as he knows he's not comfortable in front of crowds. Not as comfortable as the guy behind the camera seems to be at the moment. Anyways, Stalker, just bring it up a little bit, do a little turnaround and talk about why he was critical for me to have. He, in fact, was the first one I actually bought. The first one I ever watched a review on was rock and roll, but the first one I ever bought, and for good reason, was Stalker. This guy right here. Look how badass this guy looks, man. Look at that. All right, so the reason why, well, one, he was part of the very first wave of the 3.5, which came out when I was a very impressionable, ADHD-driven child with a single mom on a limited budget and grandparents who loved him very much and, you know, loved having great gift ideas. My grandmother bought me Stalker. He was probably the second G.I. Joe I ever got. But probably the most relevant throughout my life as I look back on my career. My whole trade when I joined the Army was armored reconnaissance. I joined the Royal Canadian Dragoons back in the late 90s, and then I met my wife in the forces, and we went off to the west, and I joined the Strathconas. But at all times I was always attached to a recce squadron, so any G.I. Joe character that does reconnaissance, I was very much thinking back to in my career, making comparisons, and, you know, just little musings in my head going, I bet you Stalker never had to dig this deep in the middle of the rain. Oh, this sucks, you know. So Stalker had a lot of personal relevance for me. So as you can see, he definitely looks decked out, ready to go in the bush, everything like that. But it's beyond that for him. He's definitely one of the most amazing characters. I still, to this day, put him in probably my top 3 as far as the tactical coolness of this guy and overall feel of that character. And it's funny, you know, the G.I. Joes, the Hasbro, what they've done here is they've done, almost the perfect marketing in that they are looking at the age demographic and what kind of incomes they have. You know, when we were kids, these were Christmas gifts, and they were about as big as your index finger, 3.5 inches. And you know, you got them for your birthday and Christmas, and maybe the odd random present for being good and things like that, or good report cards. You were lucky if you got vehicles as big presents. You know, people on budgets didn't necessarily get to have a lot of the big sets like the Whale and the Sky Striker and certainly the Flag, right? But Hasbro waited, and G.I. Joe waited for those kids that were there when they were all new and obsessed with it to become like grown-ass adults with disposable incomes. Guys, I'm going to watch my language. I am ex-military, but every now and then one might slip. Sorry. But yeah, they went for us adults with disposable incomes and played on our nostalgia bone perfectly by giving us more details, but just the perfect amount of nostalgic familiarity. This is the same camo pattern that Stalker had back in the 80s when he came out with the original. Yeah, he had webbing that was seldom, like, just fused on, right? Didn't move. This stuff moves and wiggles around. You can do stuff with these webbings. Like, he's got a grenade there. He's got a pouch over here we'll talk about later. He's got another knife embedded in this. And yeah, they do take these extra add-on parts and certain components, and they recycle them into other characters and things like this. But the point is that they're capturing the right details, like the difference between the fabric of the actual belt. Then you've got the plastic buckle that military guys love and hate at the same time. And then it goes to a padded hip protector, waist protector for you know, for the rest of his web belt, right? If you look at other characters, they have load-bearing vests. He's got webbing, and that's the difference. The webbing is like a 3-strap component system that it gives you a lot more flexibility and weighs you down a lot less. Whereas, you know, when it covers your entire chest and your entire back, and you got all these pouches going across, you know, that's a different thing. That's a chest rig system, and that's a different thing. For Recce, the webbing is always preferred by the guys I worked with because it was so lightweight and easy to use, easy to load up the way you wanted it, and manageable. Didn't snag on as much stuff. You didn't have as many problems with it, right? So I thought that was really cool. Anyways, so as with the other ones, we're going to follow a format. I'm going to treat this just like a military inspection. We're going to go through Stalker head to toe, and I'm going to point out the likes and the dislikes and some little things that I thought were cool little details because of why, probably something tied to something I've seen over my years in the military that I think Hasbro's managed to get or should consider for next figurines. I'll go over their equipment and their add-ons as we go. Just a quick shout out to a few of the guys who are doing the reviews that I was inspired by enough to watch this. So you got Kyle Peterson, who does his reviews, and a big fan of his. So I just want to thank him again for being so inspiring and so fun to watch behind the camera talking about this stuff. Then we have the Saturday morning Tap Toy Collector, who another fun one, and very smooth behind that camera with his editing and everything like that. I definitely wish, you know, I was more familiar with editing to do it more the way he does it. He's very good to watch if you get a chance. Saturday morning Toy Collector, Kyle Peterson. And then you have, oh, pardon me, I can't think of their names right now. 1 second. Well, we'll probably talk about them again in another moment, but the Australian fella from the ex-military that I mentioned in my first video, and I'll think of him at another time. I apologize for not doing that on top of my head. But anyways, we'll go head to toe on him, and then we'll close off by just some closing thoughts on the character and things like that. So starting with the head, we'll just zoom in a bit on Stalker here. All right, so as you can see, he's got that beret, which we are getting used to seeing with guys like Falcon, you know, Flint, and we're going to see it down the line. This one, unfortunately, you know, you can really see it in this light. It's got the mold lines on it, which, you know, if I were to take the time to shave those down and make sure that there was no discoloration, I'll probably do that. And then you got your cap badge in there. I might add a little bit of a wash in here. Sorry, I got to get that in front of the camera, don't I? Add a little bit of a wash in here, possibly to get the differentiation between the two bars there, and just get a bit of depth into that. But just a great molded cap, and it sits perfectly. It doesn't fall off when you pick the figure up and move them around. Like, it's snug, but it's not so snug that you have to pop it off or risk doing any paint damage to it. If you look at Stalker's hair, he's got that clean cut hairline. You know, you could set your watch to this haircut. You know, it's a very military in style, but he's got that shaved line in there. Just, you know, he is a Joe. There's that Joe privilege showing up, you know. But under what I'm understanding, the new regs are, and at least the Canadian dress and everything, you know, this is probably still not permitted, but it's not a far reach, and I don't think we would go after somebody for that if they were, you know, such outstanding characters, Stalker at least. So, and he's got that knowing look, right? Like, this is a man that knows what he's looking at. He knows you better than you know you. Definitely got that stern stare, very good bone structure, like the cheekbones and the pop. They did a really solid job getting the skin toning just right. You can see the fading where it needs to be faded. It's almost got like a sun drenched kind of effect to it a little bit on top of being the correct shades. And then he's got that perfect little soup strainer there under his lip. Can't say enough about that. He does come with that scarf, that schmog. While it is a great piece, I mean, I've seen other reviewers talk about it, and I know other conversions are talking about it. Going over this with some sort of wash or a dry brush, or even a type of pencil like these ones that I pick up at my local hobby store. These are just shading pencils for weathering and whatnot, and they have a variety. Just going over that can sometimes make that pop and stand out and just lend that bit more realism and possibly make it look different than maybe Snake Eyes' scarf if he's standing right beside him, which is the exact same scarf, right? It's just a repeated mold. So I do like the scarf for Recondo, for not Recondo, pardon me, Stalker. I just would, you know, it's tempting sometimes to display them without it, but we'll take it off for now. You know, as with most of these guys, if not all the ones that I've come across, these heads do come off with a simple pop and then come back on quickly enough with no real damage. And there you go. He stopped sweating for a little while. So we got that scarf up there for him, you know. And then you can see how plain his uniform is under there. So with regards to this uniform, while I absolutely love and respect seeing the old 80, I guess 82, maybe 83, 1983 was it, Stalker coming out like with that CAD pat going for him. At the same time, I'd like to see them do a variant where he's more modernized. Most of the militaries now have switched over to, well, at least the American and the Canadians, and I believe the Brits, a digi cam, right? So digital as opposed to these you know, flowless or flowing lines. It's a digital CAD pad. I think everybody knows what I'm talking about, so I won't keep going. I'd like to see a digicam version of him, and maybe, you know, play around with the different types. Like, yeah, he looks like a bushwhacking recce guy right now, but maybe he could be an urban ops kind of room clearing guy and some urban gray and blue cam. Who knows? You could play around with it. Like, if they're doing Tire Force, Night Force, all this other stuff, who knows? But I think Stalker could get some different cams and going for him. Again, really a big fan of the webbing. His holster and his leg thing, no problems here. This is the radio he gets. You know, you can hand hold it, you can mount it. It's a simple short range radio, which you would associate with a guy on a recce trying to keep it down and low. He's not going to want to be lugging a man pack, but he's certainly not going very far if he's only got that short range communicator, right? So he's probably got a radio man behind him somewhere in his patrol, right? So, but he's got that personal comms device, pretty cool. Put that on the table. Then, as you can see, he's ready. He's got that service pistol again. You know, a reoccurring theme with a lot of the Joes is, you know, you get the right accessories, and in them are realistic service pistols. You know, some of the newer Joes are coming out with, you know, the realistic military weapon, and then the cartoon variant where it's like the laser gun from the old 80s cartoon. I personally will always respect more to see the realism coming across. You know, I might not know what brand, what manufacturer that gun is, but I can at least say that it looks right with that figure and the other kit he's carrying, right? So it's good to see that. These always, as I mentioned with the rock and roll video, they slide up and down. I'm not going to talk about all the points of articulation. Other review videos do that, and they do a better job of it than I probably would. But here comes that tactical sense again, where my spider sense starts tingling. Something I didn't like about this figurine. Stalker, you know, he is probably as stealthy, maybe just below Snake Eyes in that regard, right? So, you know, you would figure he's going to be sneaking around and all this, but not only did they give him a little knife over here, but they gave him this other knife accessory. And I just feel like they just did it a little wrong. There's nothing wrong with the shape of the knife at all, or how it sits in his hand. You can do all of that pretty simply enough. No problems, right? But what I do have a problem with is that big silver blade. Well, I learned early in Recce that glints and shiny things are not your friend when you're poking around in the bush and trying to go unobserved. It's a common lesson that most of them know. We blackened the blades for the most part, and I think a guy like Stalker would have probably preferred blackening his blade. For the same reasons as everyone else. It's just the little things that can lead to big things, and when, you know, no plan survives first contact, and it's usually a silly little mistake that gives it all up, right? So I think Stalker's the kind of guy that avoids silly little mistakes myself. So, and it's the same thing with his skin tone. Like, while I still commend everything they did with those flesh tones and all of the depth with the bone structure, I would also explore possibly giving him some cam paint. I see that the new Tiger Force flint's coming out, and he's got this smudged blackening that right now the response doesn't seem very good over it, and I think that has more to do with the autumn orange colors than it does with the Apache seeming smudging on this new flint that's coming out. But the purpose of the cam isn't to necessarily blend with your environment as much as it is to break up your face shine, the natural shine from your skin oils, right? So you wouldn't be applying a lot of cam paint, but you would apply some, even on the darkest of skin, just because every skin sweats, right? So you would have shine, and Stalker, I think, is he's just a bit lacking with that, without that, right? Do you like the grenade? That's nice for him to have it. I'm assuming that's a smoke grenade. Can't see him throwing a whole lot of fragmentation grenades around, but that knife, that was a problem for me for sure. Knee pads, boots, got no problem with that. Again, I talked about with how if you look over at Rock and Roll's boots from the earlier video I did about that piece I didn't like by the boot, the lace protector leather piece there. I'll just get on that. There we go. This, I wasn't a big fan of it. I mean, it's good, but I would have preferred other stuff like pants on blousing. With Stalker, he doesn't have that. But at the same time, again, I think if you're marching around through the trees and the brush and the even the marsh, you're gonna want to have some sort of gator-like protection on that. So you probably wouldn't have your laces exposed. These boots would have some sort of secondary skin over them to keep the water out. I think that would be more the recce I would prefer for Stalker, that kind of kit preparation. Again, no actual complaint about what the kit did come with. I just saw some opportunities there where I was like, they're doing it right, but there's ways they could do it really right, and that was one of them. If I turn him around, we'll just quickly talk about his I do like his weapons case on his back. I kind of had to get over the fact that, you know, he doesn't carry much for pouches, not carrying a whole lot for ammo. He's clearly not a long-range reconnaissance guy. He's a short-range kind of reconnaissance guy at best. You know, he's not carrying a whole lot of ammo with him, and he's got no big radio. He doesn't have a day pack with any food or extra ammo or anything like that. He's just got that gun bag. And while it does store a couple of extra clips from the looks of it, really all you can really make out is clearly a clip is this one, which comes out and does go into his rifle, which is a very good sculpt. And if you like it, I got good news for you, because you see it again with Duke on the Tiger Force Ram set. So Very good gun, very much the one that I believe he had when he came out, Stalker came out back in, like, I believe the 83 first wave. So very cool include there. No problems getting guns for Stalker. Unfortunately, when you go to do a quick weapon swap and you know, put that in there, if you wanted somewhere to store this one's very awkward and wouldn't at all fit the purpose of him walking around with it on the bush. It's not fully in the hole there. You do have to line up the webbing with the hole in the back to make these things sit properly. And if you look, you can see how it's a discoloration as me taking the peg in and out too much, right? So, but to prove the point, I will get it back in there. One, that looks really awkward, and two, it's going to be top heavy. That's the main upper body, upper and lower receiver group for the actual weapon that he's carrying at this time, this big clunky thing, right? And then he's got the box of ammo attached, which you can't really, I guess you could detach it. Yeah, look, you can detach it. I just discovered that. Nice. But nonetheless, it's a more top heavy weapon, and it doesn't look very graceful in that pack, but still a neat include. I did like that. If you're going to start collecting these, I mentioned it in the last video, I mentioned it in this one, there's a number of stands that you can get with these. The G.I. Joe retro cards, they come with their own stand, but the classified series do not at this point, as far as I can tell from what I've collected. These I've picked up at local gaming shops, and they're not expensive. They average about $3 a stand. I'm sure you could get them cheaper, or if you have a 3D printer, go crazy, you know what to do. But in a nutshell, that's that for them. So just to go over, right? So in conclusion, with Stalker, I think for grading, with the playability, I'm going to put him at an A+. There's a lot you can do and a lot you can pose him as. There's a lot of versatility to the accessories he's been given. You know, I even discovered something new today, clearly. And it's almost like this scarf I've discovered, it goes with so many other figurines. That's like an added feature that just makes other figurines better. So, you know, I definitely got to mention more about how good these are to have every now and then, especially if you're not a fond with what's going on underneath the webbing that's included. A perfect example for me would be if I end up getting the Tiger Force Outback. You know, while I respect the Tiger on the front, I don't necessarily know if I want it on display all the time, so I think the scarf would look good on him. You know, I often put this on rock and roll, and I think it looks really good covering those belts. And it's just a nice little thing, and it comes with Stalker, and it does come with Snake Eyes. Overall, the playability on this is going to be an A+, and the tactical part, I'm just going to go with a straight up A. They got the gear pretty much right. There could have been more added as far as ammo. I do think an extra set of binos would have been a nice little feature to have on this. And maybe instead of the radio, if you had to pick one, I would have gone with the binos. I also say this about all the G.I. Joes. You know, especially a recce guy, you can't go wrong showing that they've got a little notepad and a pouch. A notepad and a pencil, not a pen, a pencil. You know, like those kind of things are the little details that show kind of, you know, the tools of their job, and you can mold those in and not spend extra money. I think that would be a way to go with it. I think there was the binos, there was the sketching stuff, you know, even giving them belly pouches for extra ammo that you can remove off the webbing, you know, so you could actually have a higher loadout, just a simple little attachment. That'd be cool. I get that that's extra plastics, and you might not necessarily do that at the same cost or price points for the market, but at the same time, you're bordering on what could be a deluxe figurine when it comes to a guy like Stalker and what he could potentially bring to the table with the amount of kit he's used over the career of the G.I. Joe cartoons and comics and things like that. Like, I mean, you could even give him the old mail-away windsurfer, the Tactical Joe windsurfer, right? And you could justify it. And I think Hasbro would actually make that hokey trend fad thing look cool, right? There's your next deluxe at HasLabs. Okay, so we talked about that. I would say ditch that second knife. You know, you've already given them this one that I think should just be blackened. And I think this is a spot here for either maybe another couple smoke grenades or that sketch pad or the binos, you know, like some other necessary kit. I don't think he needs a dive knife and a fighting knife or a survival knife. I think one's sufficient. It's a weird thing to double down on when he's so lightly loaded out as it is. Talked about blackening the blade. The med kit, I talked about this with rock and roll as well. You know, med kits are kind of, ours were bigger overseas. They took up a leg pouch, especially if you were, they called it TCCC qualified, so Tactical Combat Casualty Care qualified. Your pouch was bigger. It was more about the size of the holster here on the side. And we would carry those on our leg or attached to our bags, and that was where you kept your tourniquets and your quick clot and, you know, all the bandages and stuff like that. I think HasLabs should put first aid kits on there. I think it's one of those messages you send subtly to just say, look, you know, life-saving equipment is just as important as the weapon equipment on our figurines. You know, just that kind of message could play well, and it does kind of coincide with the message that soldiers are told by their commanders, you know, like, protect yourselves. I think these guys are really great sculpts, but that's one thing I would definitely focus on as well. And so yeah, that's pretty much it for my assessment of Stalker. Again, one of these ones that I really connected to and part of my holy trinity. Yeah, I heard another guy mention that he thought Stalker came with the Ram back in the day, then he thought it was with rock and roll. I don't believe the Ram came with anybody, and I think that's why it was a cheap, affordable toy solution for my single mom to pick it up as you know, as it was. But I do remember most of my time, Stalker was the guy riding it. Absolutely, it made sense. He looked cool. He made it look cooler. But you know, now as a 50-year-old man with an entire career in this kind of, you know, military culture, I look back at these and I'm like, yeah, I would have to say the G.I. Joe Classified 6-inch series and their retro card series is phenomenal. And right down to the box art, guys. This is the package that you will get your Stalker in if you do get a Stalker. It is the older style, pardon me. Let's get that back into focus. There we go. I've heard some criticism on the box art that's been going on lately, some real negative stuff about, not like offensively negative, but negative about some of the box art. And I'm kind of wondering if maybe Hasbro is getting slammed where they don't need to be on that. I don't know who this artist is who did Stalker, but there's one of his pictures of it, and then there's another. But this feels like it's probably an African-American artist doing an African-American Joe character. And just as I would feel strongly that it's the same message when you look at Sprint's box, where it's probably a Native American artist or a Native First Nations, Canadian artist, Inuit, whoever, doing the art there. And the widely criticized cover girl, of course, I would now, if that vein of thinking is true, I would now believe that this is a female artist who is clearly manga inspired. I think that's great if that is what Hasbro is doing. I think that's a fantastic way to showcase other artists, especially in this culture right now. I think that's the way to go with it. I stand behind any packaging the decision they make, which showcases artists, me smart. Anyways, yeah, so I'm gonna leave it for there. The Stalker, definitely on the very first one I bought for a reason, because of the private connection. Highly recommended. A+ for playability, A for tactical. Would have been an A+ if I saw just a little bit more on his kit. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I hope you guys like what you see. I guess I would say hit like on that bar, and I would ask you to subscribe if this is the kind of thing that you don't mind seeing, a one-take video with a ADHD-ridden veteran talking about G.I. Joe. All right, there'll be more. I have more. All right, thanks very much. Bye.